254.
Yeah.
Just let that number sit there for a second. If you saw that on a scoreboard in a 50-over match, you'd probably say, okay, decent total, something to bowl at.
Right. It's respectable.
Yeah.
Competitive.
But we aren't talking about 50 overs here.
No, we are not.
We are talking about 20 overs. That is the number the West Indies just posted against Zimbabwe at Wankhede Stadium. 254 for 6.
It's mind-boggling.
It is the second highest total in the history of the T20 World Cup. I mean, they hit 19 sixes. That is basically an entire innings worth of runs just in boundaries.
Well, it wasn't even a cricket match, really. It was artillery practice, just an absolute demolition job.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating to me is the contrast.
Right, the contrast with the other side of the bracket.
Exactly.
Yeah.
While the West Indies are busy rewriting the record books with that kind of firepower, you have the defending champions, India, basically staring into the abyss.
Which perfectly sets up our mission for today's deep dive. We aren't just going to look at the scoreboard and say, wow, we've got a massive stack of reports, match data, technical analysis to get through for you all listening today.
Lots of data to unpack.
We need to look at the rise of this West Indies team because they're looking like serious title contenders. But more importantly, for a lot of you tuning in, we need to break down the mathematics of doom.
The mathematics of doom. It is really the only way to describe India's situation right now. It is grim.
It is a nightmare scenario regarding their net run rate after that crushing 76-run defeat to South Africa. So we're going to explain exactly how that math works. Don't worry, no calculus degree required.
Thankfully.
And then we're going to do a proper technical autopsy. We have sources that go really deep into the biomechanics of why key Indian players, specifically Tilak Varma and Abhishek Sharma, why they're struggling so much.
So buckle up.
Yeah. We are going from the high of the Caribbean sixes to the absolute low of India's calculator nightmare.
Let's start with that high, because that West Indies performance wasn't just about wild slogs. It felt like a real statement of intent.
Absolutely. And you have to remember the context here. They didn't actually choose to bat.
No. And that is the funniest part of this whole thing.
Yeah.
Zimbabwe actually won the toss and elected to bowl.
Oh, man.
Yeah. As one of the commentators in our research notes put it, Zimbabwe then had 20 full overs to regret that decision.
I saw that note. Just brutal. But let's look at the engine room of this innings. Shimron Hetmeyer. The numbers are just silly. 85 runs off 34 balls.
It's a career-defining innings for him. He scored the fastest 50 by a West Indian in T20 World Cup history. Just 19 balls.
Wow.
But if you look closely at the game flow data, there's this massive what-if moment, a huge sliding doors moment.
He was dropped, right?
Yes, he was actually dropped when he was on 9.
Ouch. That is the butterfly effect right there. You drop a guy on single digits, and he proceeds to cost you another 75 runs.
It was the absolute turning point. Zimbabwe's fielders gave him a lifeline, and he made them pay with serious interest. And he wasn't alone out there. Ravin Powell smashed 59 off 35 balls.
Right.
When you have two guys going at that kind of strike rate, hitting 19 sixes between everyone, it does something psychological to the opposition bowlers.
Yeah, you could see it. They just stop bowling to a plan. They just start hoping not to get hit.
Exactly. It completely demoralizes them.
But here is what I found really interesting in the analysis. We always talk about the West Indies power hitting. That's their brand. We know they hit sixes. But the sources for this deep dive suggest their bowling is actually what makes them so scary this time around.
The spin twins.
Yes, the spin twins. Break that down for me.
This is the key differentiator for this squad compared to West Indies teams of the past. Usually when you think of the Windies, you think of what? 4 fast bowlers?
Right. Pace, bounce, sheer aggression.
Exactly. But here, they have Akil Hossain and Gudakesh Modi, a left-arm spin duo that is just controlling the entire game.
But wait, for the listener who might just catch cricket casually, why is having 2 left-arm spinners so effective? Aren't they basically doing the same thing?
Not at all. And that's the genius of it. They are using them in very specific, contrasting phases of the game. Akil Hossain is your power play specialist. He bowls these darting arm balls.
Okay, let's pause there. What exactly is an arm ball? How does that differ from a normal spin delivery?
So normally a left-arm spinner tries to spin the ball away from a right-handed batter. They rip their fingers across the seam to make it turn off the pitch.
Okay.
An arm ball doesn't spin. It drifts in with the natural angle of the arm, almost like a swing bowler. Because it skids on straight and it's usually bowled faster, It catches batters totally off guard.
Because they're expecting the turn.
Exactly. They play
Yeah.
for the spin that isn't there. Hussein uses this to trap batters LBW or just bowl them outright when they're trying to blast runs in those first 6 overs.
So it's deception by a lack of turn.
Spot on. Then once the power play's done, you bring in Modi for the middle overs. Overs 7 through 15. And his style is completely different.
He's the traditional spinner.
Right. He relies on flight and loop. He throws the ball up above the batter's eye line, gets it to dip suddenly, and gets really sharp turns.
So Hussein fires it in flat and fast, and Modi loops it up.
Precisely. We saw it over and over in this match. Batters losing their balance, thinking the ball is right there to drive, and then hearing the death rattle of the stumps because it just dipped on them.
That is a deadly combination.
It allows them to control the tempo from over 1 all the way to over 15, even on a flat, batting-friendly wicket like Wankite.
Taking the pace off the ball is so hard to deal with when you're chasing 250. And poor Zimbabwe, I mean, looking at the Scott card, they were never really in the hunt, were they?
Not even close. They were reduced to 103 for 9 at one point. There was a little late flurry from Brad Evans, who scored 43 off 21 balls, but that was really just delaying the inevitable.
A consolation prize.
Yeah. It ended up being a 107-run victory, and that margin, 107 runs, is crucial. That massive margin is what brings us to the other side of this story.
The math of doom.
The math of doom. Let's pivot to India then, because that massive win for the West Indies, combined with India's massive 76-run loss to South Africa, has created an absolute nightmare scenario in the points table.
It's ugly.
I'm looking at the standings right now, and India's net run rate is currently sitting at -3.800.
Which, for a short tournament phase like the Super 8s, is basically catastrophic. It is almost impossible to recover from a number that deep in the red.
Let's explain net run rate, or NRR, for a second, because people hear it all the time on broadcast, but the calculation is actually quite punishing, isn't it?
It is incredibly punishing. Think of it essentially as your average winning margin. If you score 100 runs and the opponent scores 50, your run rate is positive. You're doing great.
Right. But if you lose big, it swings wildly into the negative, because India lost by 76 runs, which is a huge, huge margin in a T20 game.
Yeah.
Their score is deep in the negatives. It's like starting a 100-meter sprint 50 meters behind the starting line while everyone else is already running.
So let's unpack the actual scenarios here for the fans listening. Is India out, or is there a lifeline?
They aren't mathematically out,
Mm-hmm.
but they are in the ICU. Let's look at the simple path first. This is what every Indian fan has to hope for. India has 2 games left against Zimbabwe and the West Indies. They absolutely must win both.
Okay, winning 2 games seems doable for a team with India's pedigree. That gets them to 4 points.
Right. But that is not enough.
It's not.
No, because they have zero control over their own destiny now.
Wait.
They need South Africa to do them a massive favor. They need South Africa to beat the West Indies.
Oh, I see.
If that happens, South Africa finishes with 6 points, topping the group. India finishes with 4. West Indies stays on 2. India qualifies as the second team, and that run rate doesn't even come into play.
Okay, so essentially, India fans need to go out and buy South Africa jerseys for the next few days. You are aggressively rooting for the team that just humiliated you.
Precisely. You are South Africa's biggest fan.
Yeah.
But here is the nightmare scenario. This is where the math gets genuinely terrifying. Suppose India wins both their games. They're on 4 points.
Right.
But West Indies beat South Africa.
Then you have a 3-way tie.
Exactly. South Africa would be on 4 points, assuming they beat Zimbabwe. West Indies on 4 points, and India on 4 points. Whenever there's a tie on points, the tiebreaker is net run rate.
And because India is starting from -3.8 and West Indies is sitting pretty at +5.35 for it.
Gap is astronomical.
How big of a gap are we talking about here? Give me a concrete number. What would India actually have to do to fix that NRR in a tiebreak?
Based on the calculations in the reports, for India to overtake West Indies in that tiebreak scenario, they would essentially need to beat the West Indies in their head-to-head match by a margin of roughly 183 runs.
Wait, hold on. 183 runs
Yes.
in a 20-over match.
Yes.
That's an entire innings score for most teams.
It is statistically almost impossible between 2 top-tier teams. Or, if India were chasing, they would need to chase down a target in something ridiculous like 3 or 4 overs.
So, practically speaking, if West Indies beats South Africa, India is out. regardless of whether India wins their own remaining games.
Exactly. The calculator has already made the decision.
That is a terrifying thought. You go from being defending champions to being eliminated, essentially, because of one bad hour of cricket against South
Yeah,
Africa.
that is the unforgiving nature of the Super 8's format. It's brutal. But we have to ask why they are in this position. It wasn't just bad luck.
Right. Let's do the autopsy of that South Africa match. There's this great analogy from one of our sources regarding that loss. They called a close, hard-fought loss a black mark like a kala tika used to ward off the evil eye, a small blemish.
Right.
But a 76-run defeat, they call that a blackened face. That is absolute humiliation.
It's a harsh description, but it's totally accurate. The sources highlight a distinct lack of intent from the Indian batters. If you compare how South Africa played versus how India played on the exact same pitch, the difference is stark.
How so? Was it just that South Africa was more aggressive?
It was smart aggression. Look at the middle overs. South Africa's batters, guys like Miller and Brevis, they counterattacked the spin. They never let the Indian bowlers settle into a rhythm.
And India.
When India batted, they looked disconnected, lackadaisical. It wasn't just about failing to hit sixes. It was the sheer inability to rotate the strike. They just got bogged down by dot balls.
And dot balls in T20 are poison. They build pressure, which leads to stupid shots, which leads to wickets.
Exactly.
But there was also a lot of talk about the team selection for that match. I mean, dropping Axar Patel, that seemed to set the internet on fire.
That was a completely baffling tactical decision. Let's look at the logic, or really the lack thereof. You drop Axar Patel, a left-arm spinner who is also a very capable batter, and you bring in Washington Sundar.
And the reasoning the management gave was matchups, right? Because South Africa had a lot of right-handers in their lineup.
Yes, the old taking the ball away from the bat theory. But here is the fundamental problem with blindly following data. You lose context. Washington Sundar hadn't held a bat in a competitive match for ages. He was completely rusty.
While Axar is the vice captain and in great form.
Exactly. You dropped a match winner, your informed vice captain, based on a theoretical matchup spreadsheet rather than looking at actual skill and current form.
It really feels like they overthought it. They're trying to play 4D chess when a simple game of checkers would have won them the match.
Completely. It's an obsession with data without applying any human context. You don't drop your key all-rounder for a guy who isn't Matt Sharp just because the opposition is a few right-handers. And it backfired spectacularly because they desperately needed that batting depth when the top order collapsed.
Speaking of the top order collapsing, let's get technical. We have some really specific analysis in our sources on two players who are severely struggling right now. The opener, Abhishek Sharma, and the number 3, Tilak Varma.
Let's start with Abhishek.
Yeah. 3 ducks and 1 15-run score in the tournament. Is he found out at this level?
It's the classic debate with these high-variance players. Critics are calling him a slogger. They're saying his technique has been exposed at the international level. But you have to look at what he actually brings to the table. This is a guy with a career strike rate of over 180 and an average over 30.
Which is rare air. That's elite striking.
It really is. The analogy used in one of our reports is perfect. You cannot buy a Ferrari for its speed and then complain that it consumes too much fuel.
I love that.
Abhishek Sharma is a high-risk, high-reward engine. If you ask him to play safe to preserve his wicket, you lose exactly what makes him special. The argument from the analysts is that he needs backing right now, not dropping. He creates momentum. When it works, you win the game in the power play.
And when it doesn't?
When it doesn't, it looks ugly. A duck always looks bad.
Yeah.
But that is the price of the ticket with a player like him.
So with Sharma, it's mostly a mindset thing. He just needs to keep firing and trust his game. But what about Tilak Varma at number 3? The breakdown we have on him suggests something much more mechanical, an actual technical flaw.
This is fascinating, and we should spend a moment on this because it perfectly explains why he looks so stuck at the crease. So Tilak Varma is averaging 21 with a strike rate of 118 in this World Cup.
Okay.
But his career strike rate is 141, so he is slowing down significantly. The specific issue the analysts identified is his struggle against right-arm off-spin. He is striking at just 88 against them.
That is incredibly low for a top-order batter in a T20. 88 is almost test match pace. Why is he struggling so badly against off-spin? Is he not picking the ball out of the hand?
No, he's seeing the ball fine. It comes down to his stance. He's standing very side-on.
Okay, let's visualize this for the listener. Explain side-on.
Imagine standing at the crease. Being side-on means your chest is facing the point fielder. You're completely perpendicular to the bowler, and your front shoulder is pointing straight down the pitch towards the bowler. It's a very traditional orthodox batting stance.
Sure, the way most people are taught to stand.
Right. But the problem for Tilak is when the ball is actually delivered, his head tends to fall across the off stump.
Ah. So his head is moving laterally towards the offside, which effectively changes his eye line.
Exactly. Think of it this way. Imagine watching a train coming straight at you on the tracks. If you lean your head too far to the right, your perspective of where that train is on the tracks completely changes.
Right. It shifts your spatial awareness.
Because his head falls across to the offside, a ball that is actually targeting the middle or leg stump feels to him like it is drifting way down the leg side. It completely messes with his spatial judgment.
So he thinks it's a wide or loose ball he can leave, but it's actually attacking the stumps.
Right. Or he feels he has to awkwardly tuck it away to the leg side. It limits all his scoring areas. He can't access the offside as easily. He can't play that beautiful inside-out drive over cover, and he just gets cramped up.
That makes a lot of sense.
This makes him incredibly vulnerable to off-spinners who deliberately target the stumps. He just blocks them or looks for timid singles, which completely kills the team's momentum.
That sounds like a fundamental mechanical issue. Can a player even fix that mid-tournament?
It's very, very hard to fix on the fly. And there's a whole psychological layer to this, too. The data shows he has a massive dependency on the opener.
On Abhishek Sharma.
Right. When Abhishek scores big and quick, Tilak plays freely. The pressure is off, and his strike rate shoots up to 160. But if early wickets fall, he goes entirely into a shell. His strike rate drops down to 112.
So he's essentially a front-runner.
Effectively, yes. He is really struggling to be the anchor that India desperately needs when things go wrong. He compounds the pressure instead of absorbing it.
That is a dangerous combination for a number 3. A technical flaw against spin plus a psychological dependency on a good start. It really explains why the middle order felt so stagnant against South Africa.
It does. And in a tournament like this, on these turning wickets, if your number 3 cannot rotate the strike against spin, you're going to lose cricket matches.
Let's zoom out a bit. It's not just the cricket on the field that's generating headlines. There is some noise off the field, too. Did you see the coverage of this Chokers ad campaign?
Oh, the official broadcaster's ad, yes. It has caused quite a stir in the cricketing world.
Our sources point out the reaction was largely negative. And it's a bit rich, isn't it, considering India's current situation?
It is. The broadcaster put out an ad calling South Africa chokers. The reaction from fans and experts across the board has been that it's cringeworthy and highly disrespectful.
It feels like tempting fate, honestly.
It just adds unnecessary pressure and bad vibes to the whole tournament. Sport is ultimately about respect. South Africa just thoroughly hammered India. The consensus seems to be that the broadcaster should maybe focus on the actual cricket rather than leaning into tired old stereotypes.
Speaking of other teams, we should briefly give an update on Group 2. While India is sweating over calculators and net run rates, England is sitting pretty.
Yes, England has officially qualified for the semifinals after beating Pakistan. Harry Brooks scored a brilliant century. They are peaking at exactly the right time.
And Pakistan.
Slim to none. They are in the exact same boat as India, totally dependent on complex scenarios and other teams' results. It really seems like the traditional heavyweights are wobbling a bit this tournament.
So bringing it all back home for the listener, what is the final verdict here?
The verdict is that the West Indies are peaking. They have the raw power, and they have that incredibly smart spin balance. India, on the other hand, is mathematically alive, but practically in the ICU.
Nah.
They need a miracle turnaround in net run rate, which is highly unlikely, or they need a massive favor from South Africa.
It really is a precarious position, and it brings up a provocative thought to end on for you all listening. We talked about the Axar versus Washington decision. We talked about the intense data analysis on Tilak Varma's stance. It really feels like Indian management is completely obsessed with data. Matchups. Left hand versus right hand. Spin entry points.
It raises a huge question. Are they ignoring the eye test? Are they ignoring gut feel?
Right.
If you think about previous champion teams, think of the classic Australian sides of the 2000s or the West Indies of the 80s. They had a settled starting 11 that they backed, regardless of the opposition. They trusted their best players to beat the opponent's best players.
Exactly. If you have a match winner, you play him. You don't bench him just because a spreadsheet says the other team has 3 right-handers.
Is this deep obsession with analytics actually paralyzing the players? Is it making them play the matchup instead of simply playing the ball in front of them? That is the real danger of modern cricket. You can be so smart that you outsmart yourself.
That is definitely a thought to mull over as we watch the next few days unfold. And remember, for Indian fans tuning in, the most important match right now isn't even India's next game.
No, it is not. It is West Indies versus South Africa. That match effectively decides India's fate before India even steps back onto the field.
So get your popcorn, maybe grab a calculator, and perhaps a South African flag. It is going to be a bumpy ride. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the T20 World Cup chaos. We will catch you on the other side of the group stages.
Stay curious and maybe question the data.